Studying for the GED can be hard and stressful. So in this video, I'm going to tell you a few things you probably didn't know about the GED test. Tommy, what do you think's in there? Should we open them up and find out? The one on the right is recent and the one on the left is from last month. So take a look and tell me if you see the difference here. Again, right is for recent, left is for last month. Okay, let me give you one last clue. Hey, Tommy, no biting. Here's what I have coming up. My first Minnesota winter. When one door closes, another one opens. So with that said, here's some things that you probably didn't know about the GED. You probably didn't know that there's 3 different versions of the test for each of the 4 GED test sections. Because there are different versions of the test out there, predicting exactly what kind of questions you're going to get is impossible. So if you're just trying to pass, learn enough so that you can pass a GED ready practice test, and then you should be in good shape. You don't have to know everything. But if you're trying to get a perfect score or a really high score, then you're going to want to try to know every little thing. Speaking of scores, you probably didn't know that there's 3 different levels of scoring on the GED test. You probably didn't know that the GED essay is graded by a computer algorithm, and that means that with the right strategy, it's not that hard to get a good score. Speaking of the GED essay, did you know that you can actually get a 0 on the GED essay and still pass GED Reading and Language Arts as long as you do well on the multiple choice? You probably thought I was going to pop out of that door, but I'm going to switch it up here because I want to tell you that the GED Science section does not have an essay, and you probably didn't know that because if you're using an older textbook, you might see mentions of a GED Science essay, but that's now discontinued. You probably didn't know that you don't have to get the most recent textbooks. As long as your textbook is from 2014 or later, you can still use it for the most recent version of the GED. You also probably never heard of a boxer named Meldrick Taylor from Philadelphia, who fought the legendary Julio Cesar Chavez. Taylor entered the fight as the underdog, but still beat Chavez in the scorecard for most of the fight. And then in the last round, with only about 20 seconds left to go, Chavez fought his way back and landed a hard right hand that knocked Taylor to the mat. Taylor pulled himself up to his feet, but the refs stopped the match with just seconds to go, deeming him unfit to continue. But Taylor never quit, and when Chavez was down in the score, he didn't quit either. Both fighters refused to quit. And win, lose, or draw, that's the kind of mindset and attitude you have to bring to the GED test. So I have been trying to cut back on caffeine lately, but on nights when I don't get that much sleep, I tend to drink more coffee. And today is one of those days. So why do you think I didn't get that much sleep last night? Well, let me give you a hint. See that? My cat Tommy was sleeping in the bed last night, and I woke up in the middle of the night to him scratching my face and drawing blood. And needless to say, I could not fall back asleep. So as you study for the GED test, know this. You know, there are many things that are going to come up with the GED test and in life that are really not your fault, right? But unfortunately, the only person that can fix it, the only person that can do it for you is you. You know, maybe when you were in high school before, you never had a teacher that communicated the material to you in a way that reached you, or, you know, for whatever reason you had other issues going on at home or other problems in your life, or, you know, you just didn't care because you were young. It might not be your fault, but unfortunately it's your responsibility to do something about it. And so I know I'm preaching to the choir right now because you're watching this video, so you obviously want to make progress with your GED test, but I just wanted to use that as an example because really when things come up that aren't necessarily your fault and things come up that aren't directly under your control, you just got to have the mindset that, you know, you have to do the best that you can. You have to control everything that you can control. So if you saw my last vlog, you'll know that it's been a bit of a struggle for us to get this couch put together, but we finally got it done. There's like a domino effect, right? You get stuck and you get confused and you pick up a new trick here and a new tip there, and finally one day you get it all together and bam, Just like dominoes, you knock that one concept out and it makes everything else a lot easier. So let's talk about what's on the GED test. Starting with science. So some of the most important topics to know are mean, median, mode, and range. And that's actually one of the most important topics for the whole entire GED. And the reason is because mean, median, mode, and range might come up on the math section, on science, and even on social studies, so you're definitely going to want to know how to do those questions. Now, another big, huge topic for GED science is photosynthesis, and I actually just filmed a video on that, so I'll put a link to that down below in the description. But basically, in photosynthesis, you've got the sun, and you've got water, and you've got carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide and water are going to react in the presence of sunlight, and they're going to produce glucose and oxygen. And so, in addition to photosynthesis, another topic to be familiar with is the scientific method. And again, I have made a video on that before, so I'll put a link to that down below. And then after that, you just want to practice reading charts and graphs. And of course, I'll also put a link to my video on that down below. Then after that, you want to have a basic understanding of chemical equations. And if you want to learn how to do Punnett squares, those questions do come up sometimes too. That's like genetic stuff. Those are a little bit more complex, and I have a video, I'll put a link to it down below, where I go over an example of one of those. So if you're going for a really high score, you'll want to know how to do that. But if you're just trying to pass, just stick to those topics that I just mentioned here. And that's not all you have to know, of course, but those are some big topics. And I've got a complete topic list video on GED science topics, so I'll put a link to that down below as well. But a key thing to understand is that GED science, it's not a memorization test. Neither is GED social studies. So for GED social studies, like science, there's not a whole lot of stuff to memorize, but there's some topics that it's good to review. And those are going to be mainly US history. Now, there might be some world history topics that come up, but I would focus for the sake of time on knowing a little bit about US wars, like the US Revolutionary War, the US Civil War, World War I and World War II. And you'll want to know things like who were some of the main players on both sides of the conflict. You'll want to know a little bit about why the wars were fought and who won. And you'll also want to know a little bit about the U.S. Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution. And those are some big topics. And then other than that, you'll want to have that basic background going into the test. But if you don't have that background, you'll still probably pass if you have good reading comprehension skills.
So now let's talk about GED math. And so one of the most important skills is knowing how to solve equations. So I put an example on the screen here, x plus 12 equals 20. And now this is a very simple example, and you're probably not going to see something this easy on your test, but I just wanted to show you what I mean by solving equations. So that's the best starting point for GED math, would be to learn that skill. And you're also probably going to get asked something that has to do with slope. So knowing how to calculate slope is important for your test. Also, functions come up a lot, I've heard from students. And I've heard students saying that they got percent questions on their test, and also word problems. So you can definitely expect that the GED math section will be a lot of word problems. And so as I said earlier in the video, just note that these topics, it's a crapshoot which ones you're going to get because there's multiple versions of the test. But that being said, these are some of the topics that you're most likely to get. And also, a quick note on calculator for GED math, you're going to get some problems that you won't be able to use your calculator on, but you can only expect to get a couple of those, like 5 of those no calculator problems, and the rest of the test you'll be able to use your calculator on. So get a little practice without using the calculator, but don't sweat it because you're going to be using the calculator for most of the test other than the first handful of questions. And again, I have a full video on GED math topics. I'll put a link to that down below where I cover many more topics that could show up on your test, but these are just a few just to guide you in the right direction that come up commonly. Now, for RLA, Reading and Language Arts, or actually it's Reasoning Through Language Arts is what RLA officially stands for, but you want to know some grammar rules, and I've heard several test takers say that their version of the test had some grammar questions, but they also had a lot of reading passages and being asked questions about the passages. So just keep that in mind. Again, everyone is going to get a different version of the test, so yours might differ, but I have heard that Grammar is important, but it's not as important as the reading comprehension, but definitely learn some grammar. And with the essay, you don't want to neglect the essay, but at the same time, don't sweat it. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you can get a 0 on the essay and still pass RLA if you do well on the multiple choice. And this is a fact that the GED testing service has even acknowledged themselves. But that being said, if you don't do so well on the multiple choice, if you do a good job on the essay and you get some points on the essay, that could make the difference between passing or failing. So don't neglect the essay. If you get a good strategy going into your essay, the 5-paragraph essay strategy that I've taught in many videos, which, I'll put another link to that down below. So I'm going to, by the end of this video, have a bunch of links down there in the description. And also, I'll put a comment and I'll pin it at the top of the comment section that has all these links too, so that way you guys can check out any of the links for the videos that I keep referencing here. But my point is that for the essay, all you have to do is just go into it with a strategy. Practice if you can. Practice a writing sample, and you'll probably do okay. It is hard to get a really good score on the essay. It's hard, but to get some credit for it, it's not that hard if you go in with a strategy. But again, it's probably not going to make or break your score unless your multiple choice section didn't go so well, in which case the essay can bail you out. Now, like I said, reading comprehension is what the RLA test is mainly about. And you're going to get reading comprehension skill improvement from practice. There's also strategies you can use, like the rap paraphrasing strategy, and you guessed it, I have a video on that, so I'll put a link to that down below as well. So your next step now would be to take my GED practice test, and it's a short video that covers a practice test question from each of the 4 sections here, so that'll be a good way to figure out where you're at and see the kind of questions that you'll be asked for the GED test. And also, you're more than welcome to check out any of those links that I'm going to put down below